Hello, and welcome to A Cuppa with Karen.
Vanessa, thanks so much for your time. For those not following this debate, leading journalists such as the Australian's Paul Kelly have said this is a dangerous time for religious schools. Why is that?
Well, that's exactly right, Lyle. It is extremely concerning that the Australian Law Reform Commission put out a report, a set of recommendations that would ultimately make it very difficult for Christian and other religious schools to continue operating as genuine faith based communities. For us, it's fundamental that we're able to employ staff who share our beliefs, can teach our beliefs. And we do need protections in discrimination law to be able to do that so that we're not accused of discrimination when we choose to employ a Christian bus driver or a Christian maths teacher or a Christian principal. We want all staff to be sharing the beliefs on the same page. But those protections that we currently enjoy, the ALRC has threatened or recommended to the government to remove those. And so that's why we are coming out so strongly against these recommendations and imploring the government to not enact those recommendations and ensure that Christian schools can continue to be Christian schools.
Why do you think the government, and this is in large part driven by the Attorney General Mark Dreyfus, why do you think they want to take away this freedom from Christian schools to employ staff who are exclusively Christian and who will uphold the value of the schools?
Well, it all comes down to discrimination law and this idea that you can't discriminate against people. Well, for us, we don't see it as discrimination to choose to employ people who share our faiths and beliefs. We currently do have exemptions within those laws, and discrimination, I guess, it has a very negative connotations. But the Christian faith is about loving people, sharing the good news of Jesus with the students who are coming to our schools. But to do that, we do need to be able to choose to employ people who share our beliefs. So for us, it's not about discrimination, it's about that positive choice. And, that's what parents are paying for when they send their children to a Christian school. I myself have 5 children and I've chosen to send them to a Christian school. And I expect that staff would be modelling those beliefs, sharing those beliefs. Otherwise, what's the point? What's the point of calling yourself a Christian school if you can't deliver for parents what they're actually choosing and paying for?
Yeah, and I guess the point that you and others made at those brilliant town hall meetings that we saw in the opening clip was that if people don't agree with those views, there's plenty of other schools where they can go and work.
Absolutely. Nobody is forced to send their child to a Christian school. Nobody's forced to agree with the Christian beliefs. I
Mm.
wouldn't personally send my children to an Islamic school or a Jewish school because that's not
Mm.
aligned to my family's beliefs and faith heritage. So, this is all about protecting diversity and freedom of choice within the educational sector. It's a good thing that we can have Christian schools, Jewish, Islamic state schools, independent schools that don't have a particular faith perspective. That's a good thing for Australia. So we think the government should be protecting that diversity and allowing schools and parents ultimately to have that choice for their children. And so why would the government be looking to remove those exemptions that schools rely upon when it already does work quite well?
Mm. Now, during the same-sex marriage campaign back in 2017 and the years leading up to that, and of course during 2017 when that plebiscite went through, marriage was changed and the law moved against a Christian view of marriage and a Christian view of gender, even a scientific view of gender. We were then promised religious freedom protections. Both sides of politics have promised that. Why do you think it's been almost impossible for that to have been delivered? Here we are almost 6 years after the change to the marriage laws, and yet the victors in the same-sex marriage campaign, now rebadged Equality Australia, continue to try and wage legal action against Christian schools. Why is it so difficult to provide the protections that have been promised?
That's a good question, Lyle. I don't know the answer, to be honest.
You do know, Vanessa, you were right at the start. Uh, the Australian Human Rights Commission. The Commission welcomes ALRC report on religious schools and anti discrimination law. The Australian Human Rights Commission welcomes the tabling of the report by the Australian Law Reform Commission on religious educational institutions and anti-discrimination laws. Sex Discrimination Commissioner Anna Cody said, "Our federal laws must not allow discrimination against students or teachers at any school on the basis of their sex, sexuality, or gender identity, and I encourage the government to amend the Sex Discrimination Act accordingly." And not just the Sex Discrimination Act. Consultation papers, religious educational institutions, and anti-discrimination laws. Under technical consultation proposals, number 11, the Australian Human Rights Commission Act of 1986 should be amended so that religious educational institutions are subject to the Act. The Australian Human Rights Commission has certain powers under the Australian Human Rights Commission Act in relation to discrimination. Religious institutions are carved out from a definition of the Discrimination Act in Section 3 and thus not subject to the powers of the AHRC in relation to discrimination. This proposal would remove the carve-out for religious educational institutions, making them subject to the Commission's inquiry powers. See Proposal 14 in relation to the inconsistency this would introduce between religious educational institutions and other religiously affiliated service providers. Following implementation of Proposals 1 to 11, the Australian Government should consider and consult on further reforms to simplify and strengthen Commonwealth and anti-discrimination laws, including by addressing inconsistencies arising from reforms proposed in this inquiry. Also from March this year, Just Equal is a lobby group. They also welcome the recommendations. We welcome the ALRC's recommendation based as they are on human rights principles and on experience in most of the states where discrimination by faith-based schools is already prohibited. We are disappointed the ALRC inquiry did not cover faith-based hospitals, charities, and other services, but we hope this report will lay the foundations for the removal of their special exemptions as well. We believe exemptions proposed by the ALRC allowing faith-based schools to discriminate on the grounds of religious affiliation should be as tight as possible to ensure they do not allow anti-LGBTQIA plus discrimination by another means. So this is from 2016. I don't know how relevant it is to the schools thing, but Labor to appoint new champion for LGBTI. There's no Q in there in 2016. Australians. A shortened Labor government will appoint a full-time LGBTI discrimination commissioner to the Australian Human Rights Commission. So then they can be a protected group under the UN stuff.
And I'm going to share with you this clip from Jordan Peterson because I think he nails this. He talks about this with Dave Ramsey on his show. And to me, he articulates so well why it's so important that we don't just sit on the sidelines, but we actually engage in this cultural phenomenon that's happening. Really, this cultural collision is a better way of saying it.
I don't have to enter into that conversation. Like, yeah, you're a nut, and I'm moving on.
Yeah,
You know,
Well, let me pull it back. I kind of skipped forward a little bit too much. Here we go.
one of the ways you combat those kinds of things, if you don't have, number one, don't have to have an argument. You just have to be right and just keep moving.
Yeah.
But I don't have to defend. I don't have to enter into that conversation. Like, yeah, you're a nut, and I'm moving on.
Yeah,
You know,
well,
but
Partly we're in a situation where you probably do have to learn to articulate it, because what's happening is that central ethos, that traditional ethos, even voluntary exchange, it's under such vicious attack that if you don't learn to defend it and articulate it, it's going to be taken from you. And that probably means, I suspect that means that each of you is going to have to think to some degree about how to involve yourself in at least the local political landscape. It's like, you know what the school boards are doing, or maybe you don't and you should. I mean, these low-level political positions have been occupied by radical types, and the only real solution to that is to take them away and occupy them with people who have some sense. And the problem is you probably have something better to do. But it doesn't matter, because at the moment, if you abdicate that responsibility, then the radicals are going to take it, and then they're going to take what you have. That already happened in the universities. We abdicated our responsibility as professors, and the radicals took the institutions from us. And as far as I'm concerned, they're gone. We're not getting them back. They're done. So what happened in the universities is the administration took over the faculty. The faculty retreated 3,000 steps. The administration took over the faculty, and then the DEI radicals took over the administration. And the same thing's happening on the corporate front. And the way that you're enabling that, I don't know how relevant this is to everybody in the room, but you hire an HR person, you hire a DEI consultant, you start playing that game maybe to keep the critics off your back, they will take you out. Don't do that. That's a big mistake. You think, well, you know, we have to play the public relations game. We have to look like we're appeasing the radicals. You can't appease a snake. It's a big mistake.
They need to say no. None of it, not at all. Lawyer up. Anyway, see what happens. See you later. Bye.